Her soporific election campaign turned out to be an eerie calm before a mighty political scare for Angela Merkel and her Christian Democrats, CDU. The German Chancellor suffered a diminished majority and has lost her comfortable centrist Social Democrat, SPD, coalition partners, who scored their worst results since World War II. Those blows were compounded by the collapse of her conservative partners in Bavaria, the Christian Social Union, CSU, who scored less than 40% in a state where they normally command an absolute majority. And to salt the wound, the far-right Alternative for Germany, AfD, will enter the Bundestag for the first time as the third-largest party. So how has the media digested this fragmentation in Germany's political landscape? In keeping with their attitude over the last 4 years, many newspapers paid most attention to the AfD insurgency. Der Spiegel, Germany's leading weekly news magazine, was not alone in warning readers against complacency. Because the AfD is no ordinary party, wrote Der Spiegel's Stefan Kuzmany. Its ranks, even its leadership, include people who openly court far-right positions, who want to take a positive view of the German military's actions in World War II, who minimize the Holocaust and want to abolish the remembrance of it. And now those people will soon be sitting in the German parliament, the Bundestag. No, this is more than just common European right-wing populism. This is an attack on our liberal democracy, and the other parties, indeed the rest of society, must resist it. That will be our main task over the next 4 years. The TAS and the phased left-wing TAS newspaper struck a similar note, predicting that racists and reactionaries would now lower the tone in the German parliament. The AfD will provoke and snub, it will exaggerate and downplay, it will spread fear and incite aggression. That is what it lives on, wrote editor-in-chief Georg Loesch. Only rarely does a wide audience follow the plenary debates on TV, and yet the Bundestag is a central political point, it is the nerve center of democracy. If the nerve center is attacked, then it can paralyze the organism. That must be prevented. But, as the conservative Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, FAZ, pointed out, that is how democracy works, and while we will hear speeches that put us to shame, the AfD's success was the manifestation of the protest against the unresolved questions of immigration. The FAZ's Matthias Müller von Blumenkron also made a startling prediction: Merkel's new government, likely to be a four-way coalition between her CDU, the CSU, the re-energized Free Democratic Party, FDP, and the Greens, would last a maximum of 2 years. Such coalitions are, experience shows, wearying and exhausting. Maybe by then the AfD will have exposed itself enough. Maybe the SPD will have realized that opposition suits it even less than government. But surely the Chancellor will then have decided that she's had enough. The result would be new elections, the end of the Merkel era, and a new government. The Guardian and the New York Times abroad, the press reaction was mostly shock and concern. It is a sign of growing political fragmentation, wrote the British Guardian newspaper in its editorial. It introduces into German federal politics an element of toxicity and polarization that anyone attached to liberal democracy can only be concerned about. But elsewhere the newspaper tried to soothe the pain by pointing out how polls showed that only 34% of AfD voters made their vote out of conviction for the party. In short, the relationship between AfD and its voters is weak, and is mostly defined by opposition to other parties rather than by support for AfD itself, wrote columnist Cass Moodie optimistically. The New York Times took a broader international view, and worried that Merkel would now be forced to pander to the lost right-wing voters, not least because the Chancellor indicated as much in her post-election speech. Hopefully, that goal, and negotiations with potential coalition partners, will not entail erosion of the values the Chancellor has defended in the past, its editorial said. Since accepting more than 1 million refugees in 2015, Ms. Merkel's government sharply reduced the flow, partly through a deal with Turkey that has been criticized by human rights groups. Her handling of that, or any challenge she has faced, is open to criticism. But her non-ideological leadership has helped Germany, Europe and the world. Its continuation counterbalances the demagoguery loosed on the world.